I never thought the person who once called me supermom would one day scream that I contributed nothing. But there I was, 67 years old, sitting in a kitchen I'd cleaned every single day for 5 years with a crumpled electric bill in my lap and my son, my own flesh and blood, towering over me with anger in his eyes. It was just after sunset on a Tuesday. The kids were upstairs finishing their homework. The stew I had slow cooked all afternoon simmered gently on the stove, and the house, as usual, ran like clockwork because I made it so. I had just sat down in the small corner chair to rest my swollen knees when Reggie came stomping in like a thunderstorm in a suit. He didn't say hello, he didn't ask how the kids were, he didn't acknowledge the smell of dinner or the neatly stacked laundry. He just tore open the day's mail like a man searching for a reason to explode. And when he found the electric bill, $297.84, he didn't hesitate. "You see this?" he growled, eyes darting to me. Before I could even respond, he flung the bill into my lap. It was like he had thrown a brick at me. $300 to keep the house warm for a woman who doesn't pay a single damn bill. I stared at him, stunned. "Excuse me? You heard me," he snapped. "You live here. You eat our food. You contribute nothing. Freeloaders don't get to be warm." That word freeloader cut deeper than anything I'd ever heard. I'd carried him inside my body, raised him with scraped knees and school projects, stayed up nights when he had fevers and breakups and failures. And now I was a line item on his utility bill. Simone walked in just then, pristine in her lawyer's suit. She didn't say a word. Her silence was more cruel than any insult. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I just folded the bill neatly, placed it on the table beside me, and stood up. "You're right, Reginald," I said with a calm I barely recognized. "It's time I stopped being a burden. I'll make other arrangements." He scoffed, already turning his back. "Good. It's about time." He had no idea I wasn't just walking away from his anger. I was resigning from the thankless job of holding his life together for free. And the day was coming when he would know exactly what that had cost him. Before I continue, I want to ask all of you to please give a like to this video and subscribe to my channel, The Silent Stories, for more stories like mine. Your support means the world to me. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment telling me which country you're tuning in from. It's incredible to see how far this community of wonderful people has grown, and I'm so grateful to be able to share my story with you. It didn't happen overnight. No one ever sits you down and says you're about to become invisible. It's a slow, quiet slide from being needed to being used to being ignored. And in my case, it started the day I sold the only home I had ever known. 5 years ago, my husband Charles passed away after a long illness. He was my compass, my partner, the one person who made the world make sense. Losing him left a silence in my life I didn't know how to fill. I spent months wandering that old house, haunted by echoes of a life that no longer existed. I didn't feel ready to let it go. But when Reggie and his wife Simone invited me to move in, it felt like a lifeline. "We just want you close," Reggie had said. His tone soft, practiced. "You're alone in that big house, and we could really use help with the baby. It's a win-win, Mom. A win-win." That was the phrase. I should have known then that anything described as a win-win usually means someone's about to lose more than they realize. So I did what mothers always do. I said yes, I sold the house Charles, and I built over 40 years of marriage and took a portion of my savings, my retirement, and gave it to them to help with the down payment on their new home. It felt like a final gift, a last act of love, a way to anchor myself to something that still had meaning. I moved into their guest room with just a few suitcases and a heart full of purpose. I was grandma now, full time, on call, no salary, no days off. At first, it felt good. I held baby Leo during his colicky nights. I made dinners, ran errands, folded their laundry just how Simone liked it. Oh, but somewhere between Leo's first birthday and the arrival of their second child, Maya, I stopped being a guest. I became staff. There was no moment of transition, no family meeting, just more responsibilities, more expectations, less appreciation. Soon I was the unpaid nanny, the cleaner, the chef, the school chauffeur. They stopped thanking me. They stopped noticing. My love had become a service, my presence a cost. and by the time Reggie threw that bill in my lap, they had rewritten the story entirely. I wasn't the woman who held their family together. I was just someone who used too much electricity. They say that love is shown through actions, not words. That's exactly how I lived. My love was in the freshly ironed uniforms, the carefully planned grocery lists, the meals that waited hot on the table each evening. My love was the reason their lives worked seamlessly until it didn't. But here's the cruel truth no one tells you. When love takes the shape of labor, people start mistaking it for duty. And when that labor is unpaid, it becomes invisible. That's what happened to me. I was the machine behind their shiny lives, but they only noticed me when something broke down. Every day I rose at 5:30 a.m. while the house was still wrapped in silence. I packed lunches, laid out clothes, brewed coffee, and loaded the dishwasher from the night before. When Leo had nightmares or Maya wet the bed, it was me, not their parents, who got up. I was the warm body that comforted, cleaned, and corrected without complaint. And when the sun came up, I drove them to school while Simone scrolled through emails and Reggie reviewed financial reports over breakfast I had made. After drop-off, I returned to the house. No break, no pause. There was laundry to fold, beds to make, toilets to scrub, groceries to buy. I knew every corner of that house better than they did. I knew how Maya liked her pancakes cut, how Leo needed extra time before brushing his teeth, how Simone preferred her kale washed in ice water to keep it crisp. I even remembered to stock Reggie's special almond milk, though he never once thanked me for it. I never stopped. While they climbed their corporate ladders, I held the base steady. When they posted their picture-perfect holiday cards or entertained clients over pristine countertops, it was my hands that had polished that illusion, yet to them I was just there. A background feature, a dependent. The worst part? I believed it for a while. I believed that my presence wasn't valuable because I didn't bring home a paycheck. When Reggie would make subtle jabs about the thermostat, or Simone would rewrite my chore list as if I were her maid, I swallowed it. For the sake of the kids. For peace. For the illusion of family. But love without recognition becomes servitude. And servitude without respect. That's a slow death. I was dying a little every day, shrinking into the corners of their beautiful home, pretending my back didn't ache, pretending I wasn't lonely, pretending it didn't hurt when they walked right past me without a word. They had no idea what I did. No real idea. Because if they had, they would have known I wasn't freeloading. I was keeping the whole damn thing from collapsing. And when I finally left, they were going to learn down to the dollar what it really cost to replace me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was crying, not because I was angry. No, the anger had passed. What replaced it was something colder, sharper. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. I lay in my bed, if you could call it that, a small twin mattress in a room that was technically the guest room, though no one else had stayed in it for years. The walls were bare except for a family photo they hung years ago, one I wasn't even in. I looked around and realized that the space reflected exactly how they saw me, functional, unimportant, invisible. But I wasn't invisible anymore. Not to myself. Reginald, my son, had called me a freeloader. He had thrown a bill at me like I was some squatter draining his electricity. He had shown me with cruel precision exactly how he valued me. It wasn't just the words, it was the silence from Simone, the indifference from both of them, the years of taken for granted labor that had preceded this explosion. That bill was simply the final insult in a long string of them. And so I planned, not with vengeance in my heart, but with purpose in my bones. At 3:45 a.m., I rose without a sound. Years of moving silently through this house had made me an expert in being unnoticed. I packed a small suitcase, just enough for a long stay. A few changes of clothes, my medications, and my most precious possession, the locked metal file box where I kept every important document, birth certificate, insurance, social security, my portion of the house down payment receipt. Yes, that receipt. Then I sat at the small desk in my room and began to write. My note wasn't bitter. It was composed, even kind. A quiet, chilling exercise in what the internet likes to call malicious compliance. My dearest Reggie and Simone, you're right. I've been a burden. It was never my intention to cause financial strain or emotional discomfort. In order to give you both the peace you deserve and the space you clearly need, I've decided to take a 1-month vacation. I will be staying with my sister Clara. Please do not worry. I'm safe and well. This time will give you the chance to experience life without the weight of my freeloading presence. I'm sure you'll manage beautifully. With love and gratitude, Mom. I printed it, folded it, and placed it neatly next to the electric bill Reggie had thrown at me. To complete the message, I tucked a crisp $20 under the bill, a symbolic gesture, a small down payment as if to say, here, my share. At 5:30 a.m., I slipped out the back door as the sky turned gray. My suitcase in hand, my spine straight for the first time in months. I didn't look back. They thought they had fired the freeloader. What they had really done was fire the CEO. It took exactly 2 days for the first crack to show. Claire and I were sitting on her sunny front porch, sipping sweet tea and watching cardinals flutter across her garden. There was something almost comical about the contrast, peace and silence in one place, pure chaos unraveling 3 states away. My phone, now redirected to voicemail, buzzed with the first frantic message from Reggie. Mom, where are you? Maya missed the school bus. Simone had to cancel her morning meeting to take her. You were supposed to handle this. Call me back. Clara read the message aloud with a smirk, then set the phone down like it was a winning poker hand. Well, she said, looks like the engine's already sputtering. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I just smiled and took another sip of tea. That was Monday. By Friday, the wheels had completely fallen off. Reggie and Simone had built their lives on the illusion of balance. 2 high-powered careers, 2 kids, 1 pristine house, and 0 time. What made it work was me. I was the one who kept it from collapsing. I had been the one remembering soccer schedules, wiping noses, prepping snacks, folding towels, fixing buttons, restocking detergent, and picking up dry cleaning. Not because anyone asked, but because I cared. Because someone had to, without me. They were exposed. On Tuesday, Simone was late for court because she and Reggie got into a screaming match about who was driving Leo to school. Wednesday, they forgot Maya's field trip forms, and she had to sit out while the other kids went to the science museum. Thursday, they missed the trash pickup entirely, garbage piling up at the end of their precious driveway, like a monument to dysfunction. The home I had once kept spotless, floors mopped, baseboards dusted, sinks scrubbed, descended into chaos. The laundry mountain grew, Reggie's tailored suits wrinkled in a pile. The kids had frozen chicken nuggets 3 nights in a row. The gourmet kitchen they liked to show off had become an appliance graveyard, because it turns out when no one's planning meals or washing dishes, even fancy countertops get sticky. Then there were the emotional cracks, the ones no Clorox wipe can clean. My 10-year-old grandson Leo called me late one night from a tablet. He whispered so softly I could barely hear him. Grandma, are you coming back soon? Everything's messy. Mommy and Daddy are always mad. They forgot to pack my lunch again. I swallowed hard. I wanted to reach through the screen and hug him, tell him I'd be there in the morning. But I couldn't, not yet. I'm just taking a little rest, sweetheart, I said softly. You're going to be okay, I promise. He nodded, but his eyes looked tired, older than they should have. That was the hardest part. Not the silence from Reggie, not the mess or the voicemails. It was knowing that the only ones truly hurting were the kids. But sometimes the only way to teach grown-ups a lesson is to let them live without what they take for granted. Let them drown in the dirty dishes and missed school pickups. Let them see what nothing really does. By the end of the first week, the texts turned from irritated to panicked. Mom, please, we're falling behind on everything. We need to talk. Can't you at least come back just for mornings or help us find someone? Each message was a little more frantic than the last. Reggie had gone from barking orders to begging for solutions. Simone, ever the composed attorney, had even left a voicemail, her voice brittle with stress, tinged with something she wasn't used to expressing, desperation. Martha, I think you've made your point. We're struggling. I'm not gonna lie. The situation is unsustainable. When do you plan on ending this vacation? She said the word like it was poison in her mouth. Vacation. That's what she thought this was, a petty protest, a temporary tantrum. She still didn't understand that I hadn't walked out in anger. I'd walked out for good. Meanwhile, the bills were stacking up, quite literally. Their spotless lifestyle had always been subsidized by my labor. Now that labor came with an invoice. First, they tried managing on their own. That lasted a week, barely. Then came the calls to agencies. They hired a premium nanny service on short notice to cover the school drop-offs and after-school care, then a cleaning company to handle the disaster their home had become. A meal prep service followed when they realized takeout every night wasn't sustainable for kids or budgets, and those services, they weren't cheap. By the time they paid the nanny, the cleaners, and the food delivery, they had spent over $5,000 in 1 month. Reggie's voice cracked in one of the last voicemails Clara played for me, like a balloon finally deflating. Mom, we can't afford this. I mean, we're burning through our savings. Simone had to cancel a client dinner because the nanny didn't show up. Maya missed another practice. This isn't working. No, Reggie, it wasn't working, because I wasn't there. Because for years they'd mistaken my presence for convenience, my labor for laziness, my love for obligation, and now faced with the same workload I'd carried alone for half a decade, they were coming undone in just 2 weeks. I knew they were counting down the days until my supposed vacation ended. I also knew the shock waiting for them when it didn't. I wasn't going back to the old arrangement. They had made it crystal clear how they valued me. Now, for the first time in their adult lives, they were going to pay for what I used to do for free, and they hadn't even seen the bill yet. By the time the second week rolled around, the silence had turned into static. Text messages, voicemails, even emails started flooding in like a dam had burst. What once would have felt like concern from my son now landed as panic dressed up in politeness. Mom, please respond. We're not managing well. Maya forgot her lunch again. The school called me this time. Can you just help us find someone reliable? Leo had a meltdown this morning because Simone gave him almond butter instead of peanut butter. He said you always knew. And then quietly, from Simone, Martha, I concede, you've made your point. This is unmanageable. That was the moment I knew the tide had truly turned. When I first left, I half expected Reggie and Simone to power through with that same overconfident can-do arrogance they'd used their whole lives. But they were discovering slowly, painfully, that running a household wasn't just a matter of willpower and money. It was consistency. It was remembering the little things, how Maya's favorite leggings are always in the second drawer, or that Leo won't eat crusts unless you cut them diagonally. It was the 1,000 micro-decisions, corrections, sacrifices, and soft touches that made up the fabric of a well-run home. That fabric was unraveling fast. I didn't need to witness the chaos to know it was happening. Clara and I had a nightly ritual. She'd read me the day's messages aloud as we sat on her porch, wrapped in blankets, sipping chamomile tea like war generals reviewing dispatches from the front lines. Reggie says the laundry machine backed up. They ran out of clean towels. Apparently, Simone used a guest bath towel to wipe up spilled juice, and Reggie lost it. Clara laughed into her mug. You know, the same guest towels she used to lecture you about folding wrong. I smiled but said nothing. The quiet satisfaction wasn't about revenge. It was about truth finally being seen. They weren't bad people, but they were entitled to my time, my energy, my emotional bandwidth, my labor, my silence, until I stopped giving all of it. By week 2, they were no longer pretending. They couldn't. The cost was beginning to add up, literally. Without me, they had been forced to turn to professional services to keep the gears turning. The first bill had come in from the child care agency, nearly $2,200 for just 2 weeks of part-time coverage. Then came the cleaning company, another $600 for a deep reset and weekly maintenance. Add the organic meal delivery service, which didn't cater to Maya's allergies and had to be replaced with a more expensive custom meal plan, another $1,400 monthly. They were bleeding money to keep up the illusion of normalcy I had upheld with nothing but my hands and my heart. Clara waved her phone one evening. Another one from Reggie. Want to hear it? Go ahead. Her voice dropped to mimic his weary tone. We're overwhelmed. Honestly, Mom, it's costing us a fortune to stay afloat. I didn't realize how much everything you did, how much it added up. I'm sorry, just tell us when you're coming home. That last word, home, landed like a sour note. It wasn't my home anymore. It never had been. Not since the day I became the live-in help instead of the matriarch. Simone's message came the next morning, terse, edged with panic beneath a lawyer's restraint. We've canceled our weekend trip to the coast. The agency's nanny quit after 3 days, said our kids were emotional, confused, and overly dependent. I wonder why. Reggie is falling behind at work. I missed a court deadline. We need to stabilize this, Martha. Now, stabilize, as if I were just a lever to flip, to make everything quiet again, as if I hadn't already sacrificed 5 years of my life without complaint. It was clear now, they were unraveling, but more importantly, they were learning. Every forgotten lunch, every tearful tantrum, every missed meeting, an unpaid invoice, was a crash course in exactly what I had done, what they'd called nothing. They were exhausted, drained, financially strained, emotionally brittle, and they hadn't even seen what came next. Because the woman they once called a freeloader was about to become the most expensive employee they'd ever had. The message came on the final day of my vacation. It was a voicemail, no preamble, no small talk, just Reggie's voice, stripped of its usual polish, hollowed out by exhaustion. Mom, please, we need to talk. I sat on Clara's front porch, the late afternoon sun casting golden light over her rose bushes. I was shelling peas for dinner. Something simple, grounding. Clara raised an eyebrow from across the table. She didn't need to ask who the call was from. You want me to play it? She asked. I nodded. She tapped the speaker icon and we listened. Mom, I know I've said some things I shouldn't have. I was stressed. I wasn't thinking clearly. We can't do this anymore. The nanny agency just invoiced us for another 2 grand. The cleaning service is raising their rates. Simone had to take a leave from work to cover the mornings. I've been late to the office every day this week. We're falling apart. The kids are miserable. Leo asked if you were dead. Clara winced and paused the message. I didn't react. I felt detached, like I was watching a slow-moving train wreck I had warned everyone about years ago. There's more, she said, pressing play again. You held everything together, Mom. We didn't see it. We didn't appreciate it. You weren't a burden, you were everything. Please come home. We'll do anything. There it was, the confession, the apology, the recognition I had waited 5 long years to hear. And still, it wasn't enough. I wasn't looking for groveling. I wasn't interested in watching Reggie cry over bills and missed deadlines. What I wanted, what I needed, was structural change, something permanent. Because the moment I returned to that house under the same old rules, the same old story would write itself again. They'd forget, they'd regress, and I would shrink. So I waited. The next message came from Simone, her voice clipped and brittle. Martha, let's talk. Clearly, we underestimated the scope of what you were handling. I've reviewed the household expenses, childcare, food, domestic support. It's not sustainable. You made your point. Now let's return to a stable arrangement. Stable. That word again, as if I were a misplaced couch cushion instead of the architect of their functioning lives. It was Clara who finally asked the question I had been avoiding. Are you going back? I stirred the pot of soup simmering on her stove and didn't answer immediately. Not like before, I said. I'll go back, but only as someone whose labor has terms, a price, a contract. Clara nodded slowly. You mean, yes, I said. I'm sending them an offer, one they can't refuse, but one they'll never forget. That evening, I called Reggie. For the first time since I'd left, I heard his voice live. Mom, he said, breathless. Oh, thank God. I've given this a great deal of thought. I began, my voice calm, firm, deliberate. And I've come to a decision. He exhaled in relief. I'll return, I continued. But not as your mother, not just as grandma. I'll return as a full-time household manager, with a formal employment contract. Silence. You'll what? You heard me. A legal contract. Duties, hours, compensation, the whole thing. My lawyer is drafting it now. You got a lawyer? Yes, and don't worry, it's quite fair. I'm offering a discounted rate compared to the agencies you've hired. His voice dropped, stunned. Mom, this is crazy. You're not an employee, you're family. No, I said. You made it very clear that I was a cost, a burden, a freeloader. Now I'll be a service provider. And unlike last time, this time you'll pay for what you get. But if you'd like me back, I said, cutting him off. You'll receive the contract by courier tomorrow. You and Simone can sign it, or you can continue outsourcing. Your choice. He was speechless, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't. They drove 3 states to hand me their surrender. A week after our phone call, Reggie and Simone pulled up to Clara's driveway in his now slightly dented sedan. His leased luxury car had been sold the week prior. Gone were the tailored coats and overconfident grins. They looked smaller somehow, hunched beneath the weight of their self-inflicted chaos. We sat across from each other at Clara's dining table, a stack of papers between us, freshly printed, legally binding, and watermarked with the signature professionalism of Miss Albright, my new favorite lawyer. Reggie cleared his throat. Is this really necessary? Yes, I replied, sliding the document across to them. If I'm returning to your home, it will be under terms that protect my time, my labor, and my dignity. Simone skimmed the pages with her lawyer-trained eyes. $5,000 a month? She said quietly, though her voice cracked. Plus 2 days off per week? Guaranteed? A performance clause? Yes, I replied, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. You've already proven what it costs to replace me, and this frankly is a discount. Simone looked like she might argue, but Reggie placed a hand on her arm. She's right, he said. His voice was steady, stripped of ego. We didn't see it. We do now. They signed. No confetti, no hugs, no tearful reunions, just ink and paper and the cold, undeniable truth. The freeloader had become a professional, and she now had a contract to prove it. When I returned to the house that evening, nothing and everything had changed. The rooms were still filled with the scattered chaos of two overworked parents pretending to have it all together. The kids' backpacks were in the hallway. Dishes crowded the sink. A sour smell of forgotten leftovers lingered in the air, but I was no longer the silent ghost tidying up their mess for free. I unpacked quietly, greeted the children with love, and placed the signed contract in a file folder labeled Household Operations. That night, I made a simple meal, rice and vegetables with fresh fruit for dessert. The kids were thrilled. Reggie and Simone? Uncomfortable. Good. The next morning, I rose at 7 o'clock a.m., not 5:30. I took a full hour for myself, sipping coffee slowly, reading a book uninterrupted. At 8 o'clock, I began breakfast and the morning routine. The kids were dressed, lunches packed, and out the door by 8:45. At 9 o'clock, I sat down to begin outlining the new household calendar, meal plans, and delegation chart, because now I was a manager, not a servant. And I expected accountability. Reggie came downstairs, flustered in a wrinkled shirt. Did my blue button-down get washed? I looked up calmly. I believe that's your responsibility. On Tuesdays, per the new division of tasks, laundry services are available at an additional charge should you wish to outsource. He blinked. Right. Of course. At first the tension in the air was thick. Simone no longer barked orders about how to fold towels. Instead, she'd leave passive-aggressive notes, which I returned marked feedback rejected, with references to Clause 4B of the contract, respectful communication standards. Reggie made the mistake of snapping at me once during a particularly bad day at work. I gently reminded him that Clause 7A outlined verbal conduct, and any violation could trigger the severance clause. He apologized immediately. I wasn't cruel. I still cared for my grandchildren, with the same tenderness and attention as before, but now I made sure that love wasn't buried beneath exhaustion and resentment. I worked the agreed-upon hours. I took my 2 days off. I left the house and went to the park, a museum, a bookstore, just to exist in the world again. Not as someone's invisible scaffolding, but as a person. And every month, $5,000 was deposited into my account. At first they paid with quiet bitterness, but over time something else settled in, a cautious respect. A realization. They had underestimated me. They had weaponized love to extract labor, and when I stopped giving freely, they discovered just how much I'd been holding up. I hadn't demanded revenge. I had demanded recognition. And now every dollar, every clause, every clean floor and packed lunch, they were all reminders. I wasn't a burden. I was a professional, and I had a signed contract to prove it. There's a certain kind of justice that doesn't need anger or fire to burn. It arrives quietly, month after month, in the form of a $5,000 withdrawal from your bank account. Every first of the month, like clockwork, they paid me. Direct deposit, professionally labeled as household management services. Each payment a reminder of the mistake they could never unmake. And that, I've learned, is the best revenge. Not ruining someone's life, but showing them what it costs to continue without your unpaid sacrifice. They hadn't just insulted me, they had taken me for granted. Dismissed my love, my time, and my labor as if it were nothing more than a drain on their utilities. Now they were paying the bill for years of accumulated disrespect. At first, Reggie flinched every time we discussed payment. He tried to normalize it with jokes. Guess mom's our highest paid team member, but the laughter never reached his eyes. Simone, on the other hand, grew quieter. She stopped challenging the contract after her first attempt at renegotiation was met with a curt email from Miss Albright reminding her that the performance clause would remain active for the duration of our agreement. And that clause, that beautiful clause, was my armor. It stated that any verbal disrespect, passive-aggressive commentary, or attempts to reassign duties outside of the agreed terms could result in a termination payout equal to 3 months of wages. After one sharp exchange, in which Simone asked me if I could try folding the towels less like a motel maid and more like I used to, I simply pulled out the contract binder and flipped to Section 6A. "Oh," she said quietly. Right, they had tried for years to devalue my work. Now they were paying top dollar for it. And not only financially, they were paying emotionally, socially, even professionally. Simone's designer shopping habits had dried up. The monthly Zara boxes stopped arriving. The Chanel lipstick I once saw her reapply in the hallway now sat capped and unused. Reggie downgraded his car after the third overdraft alert. Their lavish dinner parties became potlucks. The woman they once called a freeloader had officially become their largest household expense, and the only thing keeping their lives from falling apart. But the beauty of this new arrangement wasn't just in the money. It was in the space it gave me. For the first time in years, I had protected hours, mornings where I could read, evenings where I could breathe, days off that were truly mine. I used one of them to visit a local gallery, where I met other women my age painting and sketching as if they had never spent their lives managing grocery lists and school pickups. One of them, a retired nurse named Evelyn, asked what I did. I smiled. "I'm a live-in household manager," I said. "With benefits," she laughed. "You mean a grandma with a contract?" "Exactly. But perhaps the most profound change wasn't in me. It was in the kids." Leo and Maya adjusted quickly. Children always know when love is present, even if it changes shape. They didn't care whether I was grandma or household manager. They just cared that I was there, and I was present, focused, no longer stretched so thin that every bedtime story felt like a chore. With my boundaries respected, I could be joyful again. I had energy to listen to their little problems, to help with homework not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. I could say yes when I meant it, and no when I needed to, and both were honored. One night Leo looked up at me and said, "Grandma, I'm glad you're back. Mommy and Daddy don't yell as much now." That quiet, simple sentence carried more weight than any apology Reggie could offer, because it meant that even through the tension, through the friction of adjustment and invoices and roles being renegotiated, the home had grown quieter, more respectful, more stable, because of me, because of my work. And every time Reggie opened his banking app and saw that $5,000 withdrawal, he saw the number they once refused to give me, but now had no choice but to acknowledge. The truth is, I didn't need to scream to make a point. I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense. What I needed was validation, compensation, boundaries, and now I had all three. The woman they once dismissed as a burden was no longer invisible. She was essential and expensive and proud. I never raised my voice. I never slammed a door. I never issued ultimatums. I just left. And when I came back, I returned not with revenge in my heart, but with terms in my hand. And they had no choice but to meet me there. That's the thing about being undervalued for so long. When you finally demand what you're worth, the shock ripples outward like an earthquake. At first, there's resistance, confusion, rage, but eventually they learn to live with the truth they refuse to see. And the truth is this: I held their world together. Now I charge for the service. People think victory looks like fireworks, declarations, dramatic exits, but mine was subtle, clean. It looked like a silent house running smoothly, like fresh fruit on the table, like a lunchbox packed just right, like a contract filed in a drawer, and a deposit appearing in my bank account each month. It looked like respect. Reggie no longer walks into a room and grunts for coffee. He greets me, sometimes awkwardly but consistently. Simone doesn't leave notes or critique the dishes. Instead, she schedules household review meetings on Sunday evenings where we sit cordially, contractually, and discuss logistics. They learned, slowly, painfully, but they did. They learned that helping out around the house isn't a favor, it's a responsibility. They learned that love is not license, that just because I gave freely once doesn't mean they were entitled to that generosity forever. And most importantly, they learned that calling someone a freeloader when they're feeding your kids and folding your shirts is a mistake that comes with interest. As for me, I got more than just a paycheck. I got my life back. With a salary, I began saving again. A small nest egg of my own. Nothing extravagant, just something that was mine. I scheduled regular spa days. I bought a new winter coat without checking price tags. I donated to a local literacy nonprofit that helps grandmothers go back to school. I even signed up for a painting class at the community center Thursday afternoons during my contractual time off. I rediscovered the version of me that existed before I was constantly bending myself into a useful shape for everyone else. That woman is creative, quiet, observant, fierce in her own way. And I also rediscovered the joy of being a grandmother without the exhaustion of being everyone else's safety net. Leo and Maya thrive under structure. They know grandma is there for bedtime stories and science fair dioramas, but also that grandma has yoga on Tuesdays and isn't to be disturbed. And you know what? They respect that. Maybe because they're learning young that love doesn't mean servitude, that care doesn't mean martyrdom, that grown women don't disappear when they move in to help. Clara told me once, as we drank tea on her porch, "You didn't just change your life, you rewrote the rules for all of us." She's right. I didn't burn it all down. I restructured it. I didn't destroy the system. I taught them how to rebuild it, brick by brick, with dignity baked into every foundation. And while I may not have gotten the apology I deserved on the day it mattered most, I now get something far more valuable: acknowledgement and payment, on time, every month. They wanted me to know my place, and now I do. It's not in the corner chair, folding laundry. It's not tiptoeing around the thermostat praying not to be noticed. It's not scraping the last bit of dignity off my plate after someone hurls a bill in my lap. My place is right here at the head of the domestic table, not a freeloader, not a burden, but a woman who knows her worth, and bills accordingly.